Hello, it's a rainy day. Welcome back to another video. This is going to be part of a very short series called Diplo December, which is all about diplomacy. It's only going to consist of like 2 videos, but yeah, I don't know. I think over December I decided to try and do some diplomacy online via Backstabbr, and did a few games, one of which I actually won, and this is the first one I started. And called Germany, Austria, which isn't great, but I just thought I would try and walk through my process within this game. The player who made this, I'm pretty sure, is Cabaret, yeah, who is the England player. Yeah, let's go back to spring 1901. So I did have a pretty, I think I did have a good idea for what I wanted to do for opening for Germany. Which was Denmark, and then trying to secure Holland and Belgium was like my main idea for that. I don't know if I can really comment on anyone else's. I would have expected, I guess, the Black Sea stuff to happen. Austria is going very Balkan heavy. I think reasonably standard for Italy. Same with France. There's nothing here which I'm seeing as like a major. I mean, I'm saying this having not played a lot of diplomacy. I've watched quite a bit of Diplo strats, and I've seen like their analysis of Velfisk stuff, but which is what got me into diplomacy. I think especially like the 5D diplomacy video, and I mean, I think I would have found Diplo strats before, but I think it's mainly Oliver Lugg's like reaction video to that, which got me interested. But yeah, I don't think there's anything I can really comment on there. I do have some stuff to comment on full 1901 because I did not realise how turns updated on here, and so I NMR'd because I did not reload the page and thought that it was still on spring, but it turns out it was in fall. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a sandbox here of what I would have done. So I did actually end up doing this on one of the other games when I played as Germany. I guess I can quickly show. This one did not go so well, but if I go back to 1901, you can see I do the same opening, and so I decided to use this as a chance to try and do the opening I would have, which is Denmark to Sweden, because there is actually a land connection here, so this works, and then Kierland to Holland, and then Ruhr supporting if I'm not going to try and go for Belgium. So if I input that in, I think it's mainly doing, I think the reason behind this is so that England can't get to Holland first. And then I think the one retreat here was to Vienna. And so it bounces in Sweden, which I expected it probably would have. And so I would get Denmark, but if it didn't bounce, then I get Sweden. And I would be able to have gotten Holland, and this army's still in a good place in Ruhr. And I have 2 builds, which I would have probably done Munich and Berlin maybe, but that is not the game that actually happened. So let's go back to the actual game, where I NMR'd, and the deficits of this is that Russia gets Sweden, which I would have prevented. Holland actually stays free, which ends up being lucky because England decided to prioritise Belgium, and that gets bounced by France. So that ends up being lucky, I think. I'm not sure what else I can comment on here. I think this is reasonably standard. Not anything I feel like I can comment on, especially in the south, because I don't really get involved down here until way late into the game. So looking at winter 1901, I do get Denmark, so I do get one build. Kiel has currently got a unit in, so I can only build in Munich or Berlin. And I decide to go Army Berlin. I don't know whether or not Army Munich would have been a better idea. I think my priority at the moment was trying to secure Scandinavia. Although I don't think Berlin would have done much here. Whereas with Munich, I'm not really going after Italy, and from what I remember, I think Italy is the only power who I do not actually have any war things, like any sort of war, throughout the entire game. I should also mention this was a gunboat, so I don't know, that helps with my social anxiety, I think, and having to like try and initiate diplomacy, but I think gunboat I can manage because it's mostly just strategy. So but again, not sure if there's anything I can really comment on. What seems standard? Current standings, Russia is currently leading on 6, and I could have left it at 5 because I would have got Sweden, in which I only would have had one build. I do not know whether they would have gone for either St. Petersburg or Warsaw, or whether they would have maybe gone Army St. Petersburg, given I would have something in Sweden. I'm not sure. So spring 1902. There is a lot going on here. So yeah, Fleet Norway. Oh, okay. So Norway was assuming that I was going to go into Sweden, and that fails. Because instead I decided to go Baltic. I think my reasoning behind that is I assumed that Norway might have just gone into Sweden anyway. But I think getting into the Baltic Sea, that might have been good. But yeah, I'm able to do the follow-up into Holland that I was going to do in fall 1901. And Berlin goes into Silesia. I think my main thing here is actually trying to get Warsaw. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the Balkans with this mess, but none of that's necessarily relevant here. We do have... Hold on, what's Rome? Okay, Romania is supporting Warsaw into Oh, okay, yeah, I see how that's working. Okay. So yeah, so I probably would be a bit worried about Russia getting into Bohemia, especially since I don't have anything in Munich. But if we look into 1902, they don't actually go for that, they go for Vienna instead, which fails because Vienna fails to get into Trieste, because Trieste fails to support... oh yeah, because Trieste is supporting. But Trieste support gets cut, so Italy does not get into Serbia. But I don't know if it would have anyway, because do we have... Oh no, it's not supporting. Serbia is supporting Vienna into Trieste. So that would have cut that support. Oh yeah, it did actually cut that support. So nothing happens in the Balkans. So Austria actually has nothing go right, which is incredible. But meanwhile, Sweden gets into Denmark, but I do successfully get into Sweden. Norway is doing some interesting things. I assume it's probably trying to send a message through, like, misorders maybe, but I don't know. I guess I wouldn't have necessarily known. Had I decided to go on Sweden immediately, probably would have just held. But yeah, I think I would have. I don't know if there would have been anything that England could have done, although I probably could have got kicked out with a combined English-Swedish, not English-Russian. But I do get Sweden here, although I do lose Denmark, and my attack on Belgium from the army in Ruhr, attacking France's unit in Belgium, does succeed. So that gets me Belgium, and they retreat into Burgundy. So Overall, I get both Holland and Belgium. Oh, I got Warsaw as well, actually. I didn't talk about that. I do get into Warsaw because it was empty in spring 1901. No, spring 1902. And the art thing that was in Galicia was used mainly just to do stuff in the Balkans, and so Warsaw was completely free, and so I'm just able to march in. This means that I gain Warsaw, Sweden, Holland, and Belgium, but lose Denmark, and I get 7. So that means that within the span of, I guess, 1 year, I go from, I guess, tied last, especially having had like NMR'd, to being ahead by 2 units. Especially knocking Russia down from 6 to 5, I think is pretty good. And that means that Russia has to disband, and it disbands Army of Bohemia. I think my builds of Fleet Kiel and 2 armies, I think, is pretty good. I don't know if there's anything I would have necessarily changed. The only thing I felt like I maybe could have was Fleet Berlin, but I think Fleet Kiel, especially with sort of how like navy focused Denmark's probably going to end up being, I think I'm definitely happy with that. I think I'm also happy with Army Berlin because my main thing with this army is going to be trying to make sure that Warsaw doesn't get retaken by Russia. Mainly, Moscow is still open, so Warsaw's probably going to try and dash for that. Something that neither of Russia's fleets are going to be able to prevent. So, Moscow should, in theory, be free. So, I think this ends up being a really good position for me. Am I the only one who actually builds anything? Yeah, Russia has to disband and I get 3 builds. So, that's fine. 1903. Okay, so Denmark goes into Baltic, which means I'm able to retake with my fleet from Sweden. Yeah, Bern Standard. Warsaw's going to Moscow. Galicia goes in, which I was expecting to happen. Meanwhile, we're having a big conga line down into Picardy. Munich tries to go into Burgundy, but it fails. Now, was this the right move? Maybe it was. The only thing I would maybe say is the fact that, well, Italy's going into Tyrol, but like Italy's not being actively antagonistic against me. Like the only time they've really gone anywhere near my border was for the purpose of attacking Austria instead. So I don't think I would want to do anything with that really. I think even Tyrol Open probably also made me less hostile towards Italy, which allowed them to focus more of their effort onto Austria. But yeah, anything else interesting going on here aside from that? Bunch of Balkan support stuff doesn't work either. And got double support for English Channel because they keep bouncing each other out, England and France. I think it was with 1 unit last time, and so they try and go in with 2 and it fails because both of them try it. But yeah, okay, full 1903. Okay, so one thing I probably would have thought about here that I should have done differently was I should have had my unit in Moscow support Prussia into Warsaw, because that would have guaranteed it. I end up being extremely lucky that Warsaw decided to just walk out. It could have just stayed in Warsaw and I wouldn't have done it. Although maybe they were thinking that I would have supported it. And so knowing that they couldn't stop that, just walked out so that it could at least progress further. Maybe is what I was thinking. Once again, St. Petersburg and Norway try to take each other and fail. I have Fleet Denmark hold, and ideally I should have had something go into Kiel. I think maybe because at this point I was still a bit cautious about Italy, I decided to hold Munich instead of sending the army into Kiel to bounce, which would have definitely been a better play. That way I don't lose Kiel to Russia. But yeah, holding Denmark instead of sending that down does prevent England from getting Denmark. And so its two fleets cannot progress anywhere. Unfortunately, Burgundy going into Paris blocks the second stage of the Conga line. We've got France unit in here that gets evaporated because Marseille moves into Piedmont. And yeah, we got to think more interesting stuff of Liverpool supporting Irish Sea, going into English Channel. So it's trying to support France, but France doesn't end up doing that. They go into Wales instead. Got a fleet in Austria and Greece. I guess just depleted. Nothing else I think I want to say about Fall 1903, but there's definitely stuff I could have done better. But realistically, the most I would have gotten is Kiel anyway. At this point, my centres have gone only up by 1. I would have gone up by 2, but I only get 1 build anyway, so I build a fleet in Berlin. Now, I think my main goal here now is trying to secure the Baltic, because if I can secure the Baltic, then I've got like a bunch of stuff that, in theory, I don't need to defend. Because Russia can't really access the Baltic because the fleet's on North Coast, it means that I'm relatively free to do what I want. And so I don't have to worry about Russia sneaking in and grabbing in Sweden while there's no army, or trying to sneak down into Berlin. So that's an entire frontier that I don't have to worry about, which I think kind of may justify why I do Fleet Berlin here. Why I don't do army is probably because I think that these 2 units are probably going to be enough to take on Russia by themselves. Army build in Paris, army build in Budapest, army disband in Albania. So yeah, now I'm ahead by 3, with France and Turkey in second place. But I think my main goal here is just trying to get France done. England hasn't been antagonistic towards me at this point. They've only been focusing on Russia. Now Russia's got the North Coast gone. Potentially there maybe could have been a world where I could have actually had a pretty strong alliance with England had I decided to have gone into Sweden in spring 1902. But again, that's a bit harder to communicate when there's no press. So spring 1904. So my main goals here were take back Kiel, which succeeds. I sent the fleet in Berlin into Kiel when Munich supports it, and Russia also supports it. No, they don't. They support Kiel going into Berlin, but that fails because they are head-to-head and it's a 2-all, so that gets deflected. But since I actually have Denmark supporting as well, that is a 3-2, so this fleet has to move, and it moves into the Baltic, which could be a problem because Sweden is undefended. Over in the Russia front, my going to St. Petersburg is blocked by England, and then the only other thing is the Conga line, which stops and fails because my attempt to go Picardy into Paris fails because they do a 3 against 2, and so it disbands because it has nowhere to go. Fleet in Holland just holds. There's not really anything it can do at this point. Nothing else I think that I need to majorly talk about here, except what is Serbia supporting? It supports Romania into Bulgaria, but Romania holds instead, so that fails. And it would have failed anyway because it's going to be a 3 against 2. Right. Got 2. Yeah, okay. So, for 1904. So, firstly, I think my main plans here were just trying to secure Kiel, and the result is that I lose Berlin. Although I think part of this is I might have predicted this was going to happen, I don't quite remember, and so I just let them take it and instead try and focus my edge onto preventing them from getting Sweden, which actually now doesn't make any sense. I think my main goal was just try and make sure they don't get Sweden, and they got Berlin instead. But this gets bounced out by England, who do a 2v1, so they do not get Sweden, so it doesn't bounce, and so Denmark holds, so Kiel holds, so Munich holds. The benefit that I get from this, though, is because Denmark doesn't make it into Sweden, it means that England doesn't make it into Denmark, and so that fails, although the other downside is that I do not get into North Sea, and part of this is because I do not realise that armies cannot support fleets into a coast, so that does not work out for me. What I probably should have done here is, if I'd seen that they were going to get Sweden and figured rather than maybe I could have got England out of the North Sea maybe, and then I could have, I don't know, I could have maybe tried to have done something with the army in Belgium. It probably would have just tried to go on into Picardy most likely, but that wouldn't have really done much. Overall, I do not really get a lot of stuff going on, except for in the Russia campaign, in which I successfully get St. Petersburg, because the army in the Baltic Sea literally has no way of being able to support it. And so, well, actually no, there wasn't. Yeah, this cannot save St. Petersburg. And Norway does not try and take St. Petersburg because it's too busy taking Sweden. And had that happened, then it would have been 2 bounces, because this would have bounced either way. So actually, it was beneficial for me that they decided to take Sweden. Well, is it? Actually, I guess it would be, because I'm taking away something from Russia, I guess, but no, it wouldn't be. It would be that, I mean, either way, I would be on the same amount of supply points. It's just whether or not Russia gets one or whether England gets one. Which one I feel to be more scary. But meanwhile, I don't think there's any retreats going on here. But yeah, the Livonia one is mainly just because I think my plan was, if I did get into Sweden with the fleet, that I can try and convoy from Livonia over to Kiel or something stupid like that. I don't quite remember. I think the turn times for these were like 3 days at most. So I would have started this in like very late November, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, the winter phase, I've gone up. Oh no, I've not gone up at all, because while I do gain St. Petersburg and I do gain Kiel back, I lose Berlin and I lose Sweden. So I do not get any builds. But because I took St. Petersburg and there was an exchange, Russia has to disband, and so it disbands its fleet in the Baltic, which actually is really good for me, because it means that the army in Berlin is basically stranded at this point. Build a fleet in London, build a fleet in Naples. I haven't really looked mostly. Italy got Greece. Again, I did not pay a lot of attention to the Balkans in this game, because I figured for the most of it that I could probably just ignore the Balkans and be fine. And just sort of let Italy, Austria and Turkey battle it out and just not get involved. And I think that ended up playing out okay for me for the long run. Yeah. Spring 1905. So first main goal here obviously is get Berlin back, and I do fleet kill into there with support from Munich, and that succeeds, although that's mainly because Berlin decided to move out into Silesia. Livonia holds, and I guess the strength of Livonia is that it has coverage over 3 of Russia's centres, and so I can potentially bounce any one of them. St. Petersburg I decide to send into Finland, The thing of this one, I decided it probably wasn't worth trying to go after Sevastopol because the fleet in Sevastopol can't really go after me at all. And that's probably going to be something that Turkey's going to do. On the campaign of trying to get Sweden back, Fleet Denmark goes into Baltic. Sweden gets into Denmark though, which is somewhat bad. But in the Benelux, nah, not really major. Belgium into Ruhr and Holland into Belgium. The idea of getting something into Picardy fails, but with the strength of Belgium and Ruhr is that I have a chance to try and overpower Burgundy. Especially with support from Munich. I had 3 units on here. And if not, even so, I could do like 2 and then Belgium into Picardy to cast support, in theory. Norway is trying to, I think, stop France from invading their homeland. Especially since they did get really close, I think. But yeah, they've got Irish Sea, they've got North Atlantic Ocean. They did leave the Channel, though, which might be dangerous for France. Greece has to disband. And I don't think there's anything major. What's Romania trying to do? They're trying to support Albania going into Serbia, but Albania doesn't do anything, so that doesn't work. Okay, and full 1905. So, the main plan here is trying to get back the Scandinavians. We're phoned into Norway via its border up here and Baltic into Sweden, and surprisingly this does not get countered at all by England, so I'm able to take both of them back. Livonia does its job and bounces the army here out of Warsaw, as fleet in Berlin goes into Baltic and Munich is able to go into Berlin, which means that I'm able to retake Berlin, and it means that Russia is going to be on only 2 centres. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure that when I was thinking about 1905, my main idea about what England was trying to do in North Sea was there's going to be a debate about, are they going to go into Belgium or Holland? And I figured that Holland was most likely, because if they were going to go into English Channel, which they did, then I guess they've got access to Belgium from there too. Whereas the only way they could realistically get Holland is from either North Sea or Heligoland Bight, and so I decide to send army into North Sea, and it bounces. So I'm able to predict that correctly, which is good. In a similar vein, I predict that they probably are going to go after Kiel, and so I send Ruhr in to bounce them out, and that succeeds. Overall, I mean, I do lose Denmark, but I would have lost the centre either way, and rather Denmark than Kiel, because it means I've got somewhere to build at least. Although Munich's going to be free as well. I don't think there's anything major that I would have changed here, but what is Liverpool trying to do? Support Irish Sea into Munich. I assume what they're trying to do here is communicate with France that they want France to go after me. Although France holds for everything, so that actually ends up being beneficial for me doing all of this stuff to counter England, is that I do not get pushed. Like, Belgium does not fall, even though it very easily could have had France actually moved here. I do not know if France NMR'd. France could have just decided to hold everything. But I think if they hadn't NMR'd, they probably would have gone after Liverpool as well. I'm pretty sure it's actually only England who's doing this. And the fact that England is the creator of this, I guess, game, or like the person who organised it, makes me think that this is their intention. It's trying to communicate to other people who they should be focusing on. But yeah, I got disband for Turkey, and I don't know if there's anything else here. Would I have done anything differently? I don't think so. I think I did a really good job this round, and I don't think I really would have changed anything. Going to winter 1905, I go from 8 centres to 10. So I lose Denmark, but I gain Norway, Sweden, and Berlin. And yeah, of course, Russia decides it's going to disband in Silesia. I got 2 builds and go fleet kill Army Munich. Again, pretty standard. Army Liverpool's disbanded because England's centre count went down by 1 when I took Norway and Sweden. And I don't think there's anything else I need to comment on here. It's been 1906. So my main goal at this point is to try and get Denmark as like the final piece of securing the Baltic. So I send in my fleet from Baltic into Denmark with 2 supports, and Denmark moves out anyway. I have Norway hold just in case North Sea tries to attack Norway, but instead it goes into Norwegian Sea. So it probably is going to do the same thing. So I think I probably am going to hold Norway here anyway. But yeah, now I've got Livonia into Moscow because I don't have any protections in Russia, and Romania's going into Ukraine, so I think this was the right call. Berlin's going into Prussia, so it's probably going to go into Warsaw next, from what I remember. And the Congo line is retreating instead. Fleet's going into Holland because I think my next goal is, once I've secured the Baltic, I am going to go into North Sea. I want to try and secure this. And so I have Munich into Rouen to Belgium to keep this line here. And France does not go into any offensive things here. I think my major goal at this point was to focus on England rather than France. And I think it might be around this point that I realise if I take all of England and all of France, I will be on 19 centres, and so I can win that way and not have to worry about any of Southern Europe at all. So I think that's sort of how I decide to play the game going onwards, is to just focus on England and France. At least at this point. Don't know if there's anything else I'd major be worried about here. France is playing very defensive, and they actually leave Picardy, which actually I think ends up being really good. But yeah, Marseille into Burgundy I think makes sense, since I could have decided to have gone like Rouen to Burgundy with Munich support. But I haven't actually taken any French centres yet. But yeah, Russia going into Ukraine, it makes sense they want to try and retake some of their centres. However, the fact that Austria has just gotten into Romania is probably going to be a problem for them, because if they cannot retake any, they've got to disband. And with fleet in Black Sea, they probably do not want to lose Sevastopol. So, what happens in fall 1906? So, my attempt to go into the North Sea fails because it gets Norwegian Sea supports North Sea. And so Holland going in with Danish support does not work. However, the fact I had Denmark support means that no matter what, I was going to secure Denmark, because the only thing that would have prevented this was North Sea going in. And if North Sea went in, then it likely meant that I probably would have got it, if under the assumption that Norwegian Sea was going to try and retake Norway. And with this I decided fleet Sweden to Norway, army Norway, St. Petersburg. Speaking of Russia, Prussia goes into Warsaw and Moscow support blocks what I assumed would have been the move, which is Ukraine going into Warsaw since it's currently empty. Another option here would have been Ukraine to Moscow, and that would have just bounced. So that ends up working out really well. Galicia probably could have tried supporting Ukraine into Warsaw, but that wouldn't have worked. But yeah, once again, England is doing North Sea supporting Burgundy into Berlin. So it is just trying to signal to France to attack me. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. And they do try. Burgundy tries going into Munich, but I send Rouen to Munich to bounce. So that fails. Meanwhile, Belgium gets into Picardy now that it's empty, and the main thing now is that Paris is undefended. And this is definitely going to be a problem for France, because while they do gain Liverpool, England has got Portugal. And so that ends up failing. Well, no, it doesn't end up failing, but I think it means that they do not end up gaining a centre, which would have allowed them to have defended Paris quite easily. Unless they decided to go into send unit in Marseille, but since I am currently leading by half, actually, I've got double second place. It's actually very interesting that. But yeah, I definitely would be the biggest threat here. So there probably would be reason to consider going after me first rather than Italy, but I don't know. Anything major here? Italy could have actually got a Turkish centre here. It called correctly whether to go into Constantinople or Smyrna, and it did not choose correctly. I mean, maybe it would have considered. I don't know. I'm trying to think about. I mean, I don't know. There was also the scenario where like Black Sea goes into Constantinople. Smyrna probably would have been the better thing to have picked overall, but I don't know. There probably is a strategic reason for why you would want Constantinople over Smyrna, but although unfortunately for Italy, Turkey does get Naples, so they do lose a home centre. So we go into winter 1906, and I only gained one supply centre overall, that being regaining Denmark. But I do have 2 units to build, because I think I did have to disband earlier, so I had a bit army kill instead of fleet. I think my logic behind choosing army kill here is I've already got quite a lot of fleets, and so there's not really a need at this point, especially since even Heligoland Bay is blocked in. I don't really need it, so I'll go army kill instead. And why I chose that over Berlin, I think it's because at this point I feel like I don't need to focus on Russia, because again, my priorities are England and France, because I do not need anything else, in theory. So I want to try and go fully on the west. So I decided not to go army Berlin. But yeah, Ukraine disbands instead of Sevastopol, which I think is the right choice for Russia. Not anything else I'd really... There's definitely a lot of downsides to getting rid of Sevastopol, especially since it can be bounced very easily, and then I'd either end up getting it, or Turkey would get it, or one would support the other in to eliminate Russia. There really is probably like no way that Russia could win this. Even worse is if they get bounced out and I decide to go fully into Ukraine, then they have to disband, and then I don't know. I think my general plan was to be friendly to Turkey, so I probably would have let them have Sevastopol, especially if it was by fleet, because there's not really anything that a fleet in Sevastopol can do. And again, part of this also lends to why I decided I'm not going to try and take on Russia, because even though I've got the army, I do not try to take Sevastopol for a while. Mainly because I don't think I need it. But yeah, England disbanding their fleet in Norwegian Sea, because they lose 1 overall because I retook Denmark after this exchange. So this ends up being pretty good, because it means I don't have to worry about them trying to naval invade into St. Petersburg. And Norway has also got less pressure on, because there's only 1 navy that's attacking instead of 2. Although realistically, what else would England have disbanded in this situation? They've only got 3 centres left, and I think North Sea, English Channel and Portugal are probably all too important for them to hold, it's not worth getting rid of, I think, any of them. Because North Sea would be something I could very easily reclaim, because there's, English Channel can't really support. Because even if English Channel and Norwegian support each other, I've got Norway, I've got Denmark, I've got Heligoland Bay, I've got Holland. I would very easily get Norwegian Sea. If English Channel was gone, they probably would be fretting that France could do something. Well, actually, that's an interesting point. Portugal, they would definitely lose that. They've got no way of really reinforcing that. Spain goes to Portugal in spring 1907 and just holds. English Channel, actually. France isn't building a fleet, and because realistically, what's the worst thing that can actually happen with English Channel, right? Worst thing I think could happen, they can get there. Like, the worst case scenario I think for them is that, like, in full 1907, like, I try and go in from Belgium and it bounces because they just go mid-Atlantic over. I mean, they're just losing Spain because of that, I guess, but like, France isn't being actively a danger. Although maybe they would consider that, like, even if I don't get anything in 1907, just the threat that I could be in the English Channel is enough for them to keep it there. And so they decide that they're going to keep that instead of keeping the Norwegian Sea and then probably kicking me out of Norway and most likely Sweden as well. Since Sweden is, like, it is very hollow when you consider, like, the borders of Germany. A lot of the ones on the insides don't have, like, any sort of units in them at all. And I feel like this approach can be quite volatile. I think it just ended up working out okay in the end. But yeah, let's look at 1907. So in spring, my main idea is just get the North Sea, and I do a freeway support, and it works. North Sea retreats into Edinburgh. I am actually able to get Paris because France seems to NMR again. This is something that could have definitely been pretty easily prevented. With something like, well, actually, I think most of the moves that France could have done to have prevented it would have actually been bad in some way. Because either if they get into Burgundy, I've got 2 units on Burgundy anyway, so I get in regardless. And if they send Paris in, then English Channel gets Brest. So that ends up not being good. I think actually both of them are holding probably strangely seems to be the best way forward somehow. I mean, still, even, like, though I'm going to get it anyway, Burgundy into Paris, like, it doesn't change anything, right? Except for the fact that I wouldn't get into Paris and... I don't know. I think Burgundy to Paris is the right call instead of holding. Holding's actually really bad. Yeah. That does not work for England. Over on the Russia side of things, because actually, yeah, these are conquering again. I think my main goal here was, once I can secure the North Sea, I want to try and get the Channel to try and convoy some stuff over into London. And I think I saw Belgium is much more better suited for that than Holland is. And also want to get an army into one of them so I can actually convoy. And I need to move the army out of Kiel. So moving army to Holland just works better for the convoy. So fleet Belgium ends up just being a nice bonus to that. Like this, the alternative would have been moving the fleet from Holland into the North Sea as the main thing. But I think I saw that Norway's not really doing anything, so might as well send that in. Like, if I wanted, I could have gone the Norwegian Sea instead and then try and go like a loop, but I like what I did on this side. On this side, the attack into Ukraine fails because Austria also decides to go into Ukraine with support, and they bounce. And because they bounce, St. Petersburg does not get into Moscow. And I think this is the start of me just trying to do random stuff with Austria-Hungary. At this point, I'm not really, Russia's not a threat, so I don't need to think about trying to take them. But also, if I was to take them, I do need Ukraine. So if I do want to, then I need this. And I did not get it in spring 1907. Anything else major? Fleet goes into Tyrrhenian for Turkey, so he's able to regain Naples. And I don't think there's anything else major I want to talk about there. So, for 1907. The attempt to convoy over to London fails because A, Edinburgh tries to... Edinburgh disrupts in North Sea, and B, England bounces in London. But the side effects of this is that both of these moves end up failing. I think I try and get the fleet to support this as well, but again that doesn't work because it gets bounced out. No, not that it gets bounced out, but because the convoy gets disrupted. Oh, I think it's also me not understanding how convoys work. So Belgium trying to get this does not work because Belgium cannot reach London. So yeah, this is me just not fully understanding how convoys work. But yeah, moving fleet out of Heligoland into Denmark into Skagerrak is just part of me not really knowing what to do with these. I think that position's probably better off, although I don't actually think there's any major difference. I guess with Skagerrak, the advantage would be I could get into Norway if I needed to defend it, because, potentially either Edinburgh or Clyde could have gone into Norwegian Sea, and then I could have been in trouble. On the main Germany side, I think this is the start of me trying to counter moves into Munich from Austria that end up not happening, and so I keep losing spaces that I could be building things in. This move does not work because once again I don't fully get. Yeah, I can't support that. But I mean, at this point, Paris couldn't have been killed off anyway, so I still get Paris, but I do not get Marseille. Although it doesn't actually matter because Burgundy gets into Marseille anyway because Spain decides to just defend Spain from England, and this I don't know, is actually better off. Well, they end up losing 2 spaces where they could be building things. And so I think they're only down to 4 centres now. Although, no, they're only down to 3, so they actually have to disband her. But I guess otherwise they would still be down to 3. Just actually no. If they did try and go through to Marseille, then even so that would have bounced. They would still have gained a centre. That would have been better rather than holding, because in the scenario where this doesn't go through, they're still able to block Portugal from going into Spain. They would have to consider that I wouldn't go after Marseille, and then I'm basically just baiting them into retaking this so that England can get Spain. Which, had I actually been allied with England, would have probably been an incredible play. But we were not allied with each other due to the fact that we are both constantly trying to attack each other in this turn and the previous. So that was phenomenal. But that would have been a potentially very interesting idea to try and do some baiting, but that I don't know, was not what I was trying to do with this, because I wasn't interested in trying to ally with either of them at this stage. And I don't think there's anything else I want to talk about in regards to here. Oh, once again, the attempt to get into Ukraine fails for the exact same reason as last time. So that is something, and I think I do actually try and abuse this to some degree, but Winter 1907 first, I go from 11 to 13. Second place is still only on 6. So, but yeah, Austria's in second place now. Turkey disbands fleet in Black Sea, which actually is going to be really huge for Russia because they've now got a chance to get into a Turkish centre. But yeah, fleet in Clyde gets disbanded. And I decide to build Army Kill Army Berlin. Again, I think I consider I've got enough fleets to try and take on England. I don't really need any more. They're kind of starting to cramp up space. I really need some more armies. I decided to bring back Berlin because I think at this stage, I might need to do some stuff in Eastern Europe in theory. So, just in case. Although I do have only 2 bases to build anyway because I end up losing Munich. Had I not had Munich, I probably would have decided to have built an army there instead of Berlin, because, I mean, it's got the potential to go far south anyway, or further south. Both of Axis Silesia, which would be the main way to getting to Ukraine, but this one's got the bonus of it could get to Vienna in 2. And am I the only one who builds? No, Austria builds an army in Budapest. Okay. Spring 1908. So this was pretty recent. I think my idea now is I probably could I think, just start going after Edinburgh. So I decided to go North Sea into Norwegian Sea, and then start doing going to North Sea, and then once I've got 2 in there, I can take Edinburgh. And while I do get North Sea into Norwegian Sea, my attempt to have fleet in Belgium support Denmark in fails because Edinburgh gets support from English Channel. Well, actually the other way around. It goes in via English Channel to Edinburgh. Meanwhile, Paris holds and Marseille goes into Gascony and Munich goes into Burgundy. And the main plan is now going to be trying to go after Spain. Kiel goes into Ruhr, which I think is the only real choice it's got at this stage. Holland, I'm pretty sure, just holds. No, it supports Belgium. I guess the assumption here is that I thought English Channel might try and disrupt Belgium support. Berlin into Silesia fails because Galicia tries to counter it. But because they do this, I'm actually able to get into Ukraine by doing the exact same thing I was doing a third time. So I now get into Ukraine, and Sevastopol has gone into the Black Sea. So my Russia campaign is actually now going how I wanted it to. We've got a bit more communication here. Bulgaria is trying to support Budapest into Kiel, which I think is them signalling that they want Austria to attack me next turn, instead of trying to go after them. And they're also able to push Italy out of Tunisia. And then for 1908. This, I don't know. Austria's not really attacking me at all, right? Once again, you've got Turkey trying to signal to Austria that they want them to go after me instead, with the support Galicia into Moscow. Now, this is something I want to talk about, right? So, sure, I do get Sevastopol. I was going to be guaranteed Sevastopol anyway, with Moscow in and then Ukraine support, because Romania cannot take it. What I am confused about is why Russia decided to hold. I assume that this was an NMR, because quite easily, like, the move here is just move into Ankara. It keeps you in the game. You've taken away a supply from Turkey, and you does at least keep you in. But yeah, I think at this point I think about Sevastopol's free, so I might as well just take it now. And Warsaw holds Ukraine because I think I fear that it's going to get disrupted by Galicia, but they instead try to go into Romania because they think Romania is going to go into Bulgaria with Serbian support, but it doesn't because Bulgaria gets support from Greece. Back onto the campaign for the North Sea, I do get in with another 3-pronged attack, and my attempt to get into Edinburgh alone, under the assumption that Edinburgh would go into North Sea, fails. It would have failed anyway, because had I successfully got into North Sea, then that would have bounced them back into Edinburgh, so I don't know what I was doing. But Edinburgh tries to go into Norwegian Sea anyway, so it ends up actually working out somewhat in my favour. I could have probably just held. That would have had the same effect, but I don't know. There was a chance they decided to go into Yorkshire in the attempt that if they think I'm going to convoy into London in like spring 1909, like that would be realistically the one of the few ways they could protect that reliably. I actually failed getting into Brest because England supports France, and this starts a bit of a trend of England trying to support France to prevent me from winning, which now I think seems to be what England's main goal in this is. But yeah, Burgundy goes into Marseille to just make sure that Spain doesn't reclaim it, but all that France does is hold. So again, I don't know if it's an amount or not, but what this does mean is that Portugal... Oh no, I think it is signalling that it's trying to support... Oh wait, what? Supporting... Oh no, they are trying to... They think that they want to try and support Italy into Spain, but the fleet in Western Sahara tries to retake Tunis instead, but Tunis holds. Which, like... given that Tunis is bordered by 2 other fleets, I don't think there would have been any realistic way that Italy would have got that. So maybe Italy getting into Spain would have been, I think, better off for them. Because, yeah, I don't think it would make any sense for Turkey to leave Tunis. Probably should have just left it. Had they got Spain, then stuff actually would have been quite different, I think. But especially since France would have to disband because the army can't actually go anywhere. Especially since Gascony didn't get into Brest, then this just has to disband. But yeah. On the... we talked about the Russia side of things, so we can go on to winter 1908. And I go up by 1 center, and so I build Army Berlin, which I think is the right call here. I don't know if I would build anything in Kiel. I don't think I would build Fleet Kiel. Once because again, I'm sort of clogged with fleets. Army Berlin, I think the main thing is I just want to try and get stuff down to the Balkans now. Because, in theory I could win this by 1909. I don't think I could take all of their centers in one, but I only need 4. And so potentially getting something in the Balkans could allow me to win in 1909. But yeah, Russia disbands, and Russia is eliminated now. The Fleet in Western's Med disbands, just keeping the 2 on the Italian mainland. And I am the only... No, I build and then Army builds Constantinople. Okay. So, spring 1909. They do not support Brest a second time because they are trying to get into the North Sea. However, England's attempt to get into North Sea actually fails because they send Edinburgh into the North Sea and have neither of them support the other one in. This actually probably would have been quite devastating for me because I would have lost the North Sea. It's not being supported by anything. It's supporting Norwegian. That support would have got cut, and it would... Okay, so that would depend. So what I thought was me guaranteed to get Edinburgh actually fails because the support is cut. Had Edinburgh cut that, I think... Well, say one of them support. If English Channel was supporting Edinburgh, then I actually get Edinburgh because they move out, and so there isn't a resisting force. But Edinburgh supporting English Channel, I think there might be a paradox thing where I think the one for Edinburgh would fail because its support from North Sea is cut, but then the one into North Sea fails because its support from Edinburgh is cut, so nothing changes. And a similar situation here, actually, so I guess actually in either case, them trying to support one in... Well, actually, no, it would be different, I think, because North Sea gets dislodged, is the thing. The only difference would be whether or not I get Edinburgh or not. And so, yeah, Edinburgh supporting English Channel in is, Actually, no, never mind, that wouldn't work because I'm forgetting the fact that Edinburgh gets dislodged. The only way that this would work, actually, the only way they could get me out is if English Channel supporting Edinburgh. And if they do that, then I get Edinburgh. So maybe that is actually the better choice. I guess there's actually not a lot they could have done there. I mean, well, I guess the benefit they have is they now have the North Sea against a Denmark with no unit in. And a Denmark that actually cannot be defended because, I do not move anything inwards. So had they done that, they would get Denmark, and then I would be in trouble because Kiel is exposed, and Sweden is exposed, and Berlin is most likely exposed as well. So that actually, I think, is maybe a blunder on England's end. I'm not 100% sure, though. Meanwhile, Holland into Belgium, and Belgium into English Channel fails because there's no support. But I do successfully get Brest. I think part of my reason is I assumed English Channel was going to support Brest instead to try and keep me out. but they do not, and so this succeeds. I mean, it would have succeeded anyway because I would have cut support, but never mind. But yeah, Brest has to disband, and this solo one fails because I see that England is supporting France, and so this is going to prove to be very annoying to take because I think my priority was to get Brest out first and then Spain. I think was my idea behind this, but that did not 100% work because I could have decided to try and go after Spain originally anyway, but I don't know. I think I made the right call then because I was guaranteed Brest. In the German mainland, you can see some more stuff where Turkey is really trying to get Austria to push into me through here. But they do try and do that, but I do successfully block Tyrol, which I figured they probably were going to do. Galicia goes into mainland, so I get Galicia, and I'm able to get Romania, which they could have supported from Serbia, but I think they decided to go for Budapest instead. And this, I think, I've actually got a foothold in the Balkans now, which is, well, I should have anyway. Pretty good. Yeah, I think Silesia and Bohemia isn't really anything major. I probably should have... Nah, because I've got Galicia, so that probably, I think, was the best case scenario for me. I don't think there's anything I would change here. Yeah. Again, this is pretty recent now, so I can judge this a bit more with, like, what I was thinking. But yeah, fall 1909. This dislodge for Edinburgh, because they actually do make a conscious effort to hold. And while it fails for while my attack into English Channel fails because I only have one fleet, and so all that fails, the one into Edinburgh does succeed. And not only do I get in, but Norway goes into North Sea, so I now have Edinburgh, Norwegian Sea, and North Sea, and they've got to go into Yorkshire. Once again, France just holds, and so this keeps failing because England is supporting this. And I get a bit worried with Western Med moving into Gulf of Leon because I think my theory of what they're going to do. I guess I can. I don't know if I would create a new sandbox from this point. But what I think that they might do is have. Well, they need. I reckon they might be trying to go after Marseille, but I think the only way they could either do that is to get Spain, which isn't happening, or as if they send something into Piedmont. So I figure what they could be trying to do is Lyon into Piedmont and then Tyrrhenian into Lyon, and then I would get kicked out of Marseille. Which does, I think, affect how I decide to do things in spring 1910. But we'll talk about that a tiny bit later. In terms of the Balkans, I'm able to keep Romania. I do 2 supports, and Bulgaria, again, I think is supporting Budapest and Romania, which is something that might actually be a legitimate move. But aside from trying to get into Tyrol with a support that fails because I also try and go Tyrol in with support, they do not actually try and retake Romania. Which I don't know, I think it's because it would be 3 against 2 in theory that it fails. We'll see a bit more of this saga in spring 1910 actually. But yeah, Silesia holds because there's not really anything I feel like it could do at this stage. It's kind of just blocked. But yeah, that is that for 1909. So, oh yeah, I just hold in Brest just to make sure that. But yeah, holding in Brest actually doesn't really. It's just to make sure I get Brest. Nothing much. But yeah, winter. I gain 3 centres, I gain Brest, I gain Romania, and I gain Edinburgh, so I am on 17. And I only need 1 more to win. So, I think I can only build 2 because Munich did not move. So I built Fleet Kiel and Army Berlin, and I don't think I would change anything there. If I did get Munich out, I would have built Army Munich. But yeah. London disbands in Yorkshire instead of either English Channel or Portugal, because again, I think either of these are just too important. They need like English Channel to really defend London and to maybe try and do some stuff in Brest. They probably want to keep Portugal so they don't lose it to Spain, and also to make sure that I do not get into Spain. Austria disbands in Adriatic because it loses one, and that is it for 1909. So spring 1910. Let's talk about Romania first. So my plan for Romania was that Romania was going to support Galicia into Budapest, and then Silesia goes in and Berlin goes in, but this fails because Budapest gets double support. Right? No, it only gets one support. It gets support from Trieste, so that cancels out. And Vienna holds, and Budapest supports Vienna holding, but is disrupted by an attack. So, yeah. I think that would have failed anyway, I think, because it would have required that Galicia attacks Vienna for any chance of ever running. But then if that happened, then Budapest wouldn't have done anything, unless he thought I was going to go into Romania for some reason. Maybe, although actually this scenario would have worked because of the fact that Serbia and Bulgaria both try to support each other into Romania, and because of that, neither of them actually go in, and so that fails, which I'm actually really lucky about. Had one of them actually taken the initiative here, then I would have actually, I think, been in some reasonable trouble, because I decided that I was going to support Sevastopol instead of like holding it here, instead of supporting Romania, because I was weary of Armenia, and I just knew that I do not want Turkey into Sevastopol, and with how it is at the moment, they can't really do that. So long as I can guarantee that no one gets Romania this turn, then Sevastopol is safe, and that is what happens. And like, even if I did support, it would have been cut. But I just like, again, somewhat lucky that this worked out, but they've not, like, yeah. Turkey and Austria have not necessarily proven to have been like majorly like helpful at this stage. Unlike England and France, who once again are making sure that I do not get into Iberia, so that is fun. I mean, I say that like they've just been holding the entire thing, so I don't know if France has got like a major stake in this majorly. But English Channel goes into Mid-Atlantic Ocean. I think its main thing is it's going to be trying to get into Spain, I believe is the case. And so in fall 1910, I decide I'm actually not going to bother with Spain at all, because I assume that England is just going to go after it, and so I'm not going to bother trying to get there. My aim instead is to get Liverpool by having Norwegian Sea go into North Atlantic and Edinburgh go into Clyde. I can overpower France there. And while I do actually have a North Sea support into English Channel, which succeeds, the fact they went into Mid-Atlantic Ocean instead of into London or to Wales helps me tremendously, because it means that I have literally no opposition into getting into London. So at this stage, I guess I should mention Holland goes in, which now means that I've got both English Channel and North Sea with an army in Belgium ready to convoy into either of them, and I've got fleet in Holland if I need backup anywhere. But, oh, actually no, I should also mention a quick thing, that while that fails, I do successfully get into Tyrolia. As it stands, I'm going to be guaranteed Liverpool. I'm going to be guaranteed London. That would put me at 19. So all I would need to do is make sure that I do not lose 2 provinces, and I would win in 1910. So, looking at fall 1910 and what happens, my plan for Liverpool obviously works, and my plan for London obviously works. I decide to go into mid-Atlantic Ocean just in case, basically, this ends up failing. And the position I would then be in is that England is now completely isolated from its homeland as it stands. It's actually lost all of its supply centres it can actually build from. And my idea to not get Spain actually ends up working. England just gets it. And with that, it means I can focus more on just making sure that Austria doesn't try and do anything in Marseille. Not that Austria actually could have. Well, this is what I was thinking of in theory. I'm going to make a sandbox for this to show you what I think could have maybe happened here. So, one thing that could have happened, it's France actually done anything. This could have been a major thing. Piedmont could have gone into Marseille with Spanish support. Now, with my support from Gascony, this would be fine, unless England decided to go fleet mid-Atlantic Ocean into Gascony to cut support. And with that currently in place, then it would be a 2-against-1 and I would get kicked out of Marseille. I figured that I have a lot more control over the west than I do in the east, and so losing something in the west is a lot more dangerous. Luckily, as it turns out, Brest into Gascony would prevent this supply from getting cut, because this bounces, and I think I ended up testing this like another sandbox, that this scenario would result in both of these bouncing and this support still standing. So, this is why I decided to move Brest into Gascony, which seems like it would be an error, was to prevent this hypothetical scenario where I could lose Marseille. Now, why I didn't decide to go into Venice, again, was part of it. If what I was thinking was right, then Venice would in theory be free unless Trieste decided to go in, but I figured Piedmont could go back in if it didn't think Marseille was worth it. Trieste could just go in. I'm not going to send Tyrol into either of these, and I'm just going to try and have it support Bohemia into Vienna, but despite additional support from Galicia, it is a 3v3, and so I do not get into Vienna. What I am able to do, though, is prevent, obviously, Armenia Sevastopol fails because I do not move out, and Romania holds and just gets support from Sevastopol. Bulgaria, and this is a thing, Bulgaria does try and support Serbia into Romania, but Serbia is more focused on helping Budapest. Just supporting Budapest in case I decided to do Galicia into Budapest with support from Romania. However, if I did do that and kicked Budapest out, which I guess means I would have got a centre, the thing for Romania would have still went through. And yeah, the only other thing here is Berlin going into Prussia, which, again, it doesn't really have anything else to do. Hypothetically, if this hadn't worked out, then, it was going to work out. The only way it wouldn't is if I had lost Romania, which definitely was doable, because Austria could have, I had to basically predict that Austria was not going to try and do an offensive into Romania, or was going to play very much more defensive, whereas in theory, I could lose Romania, and then once I lose Romania, then I'm going to be sort of doomed. And in fact, had the, it becomes a lot more dangerous had, say, Turkey actually got into Romania, because then I would realistically have a chance of losing Sevastopol, potentially anyway. I think what most likely happened is I would have had to have retreated into Ukraine, and then from then, I think I could have still supported Sevastopol in theory, but I would have still lost Romania. And, had the Marseille thing gone down as well, then I would have been stuck on 17 again. And, wouldn't have ended, and I would have been in a lot more trouble because, like, you know, once I lose Galicia, which probably could happen at this point, like, you know, all of this is just exposed and I can't do anything. But that did not happen, and the result of that is we're at winter 1910, and I do get free builds, but you know, at this point I am on 19, and so the game is over. So this is the final map. France has been wiped by England, and so I guess France would finish in 6th place with Russia on 7th. England and Italy tie for 4th, although it would be worth noting that England has none of their home centres and Italy does have only home centres. 3rd place would be Austria on 5, 2nd is Turkey on 6, and then I'm in 1st with 19. But yeah, that was, I think, for a first game of diplomacy, I think that actually went quite well, considering I NMR'd the 2nd turn in. But yeah, this was going to be a bit of a longer video. I don't actually know if this will end up going out in December. It depends if I can get longer videos sorted out by then. Hopefully I can. But yeah, that was my first proper game of diplomacy. I don't think I'm going to do any more online at this stage. I'm probably going to focus more on like the sort of physical release version. But I've got another interesting diplomacy video planned for later in the month. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.